is 9/11 Freefall.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele. Tonight, I'll be joined by Richard Gage, AIA, founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, and by Erik Lawyer, the founder of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth. They've got a new project, a new DVD that's going to be coming out, debuting around the anniversary this year. You're going to be able to purchase it. You're going to be able to watch it and distribute it everywhere and anywhere that people will listen. People will learn the scientific evidence proving that the buildings in New York were brought down in controlled demolitions that day. They're going to be talking about this project, and this is something that's been in the works for quite a long time, I guess. It's been sitting on the shelf for a number of years. They finally decided to complete it. So they'll be going into greater detail on what it's about and how you will be able to get copies of it. They're also going to be talking about some of the anniversary events going on this year. Of course, they'll be debuting the movie in New York this year. There'll be other events hosted by other organizations talking about other elements of 9/11, certain things that we've touched on a little bit here on this program. So stay tuned. I'll be playing that for you in about 10 minutes or so. Before we get to the interview tonight, I just want to make everybody aware. We've talked a lot about the Beyond Misinformation book, what science says about the destruction of World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7. There's an article put out by AE 9/11 Truth titled, "Make This the Most Educational 9/11 Anniversary Ever." It talks about the book. It says, "This comprehensive 50-page guide to the World Trade Center evidence will be the ultimate piece of literature you've always wanted to be able to share with your friends and family. Between now and August 31st, we're offering it in bulk at a discount because our goal is to distribute tens of thousands of copies. Pick the quantity that matches your level of ambition, and it'll be on your doorstep no later than September 10th. And then it's got different prices listed. You can get 10 for $14.99, 20 for $29.99, 50 for $74.99, and 100 for $144.99. These, of course, include shipping and handling, too. But these are being produced for you to be able to order them in bulk and distribute them. So if you got a local 9/11 group, you're going to be going out doing some outreach out in the streets or in some particular place, could be a university, could be at a fair, anywhere that people are congregated, you can have several copies available, ready to hand out. All right, and this is the kind of thing that can go viral. And I'm not talking about the internet viral. I'm talking about viral where it really matters, even most, is out into the real world where we live and breathe and eat and sleep every single day, where the real change is going to happen. So before I play the interview with Richard Gage and Erik Lawyer, I'm going to play a quick clip from a press conference Erik Lawyer gave several years ago, representing Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, pointing out some of the issues with NIST's investigation of the destruction of the towers that day. And then I'll go ahead and play the interview after that. Before I do play that clip in that interview, we're going to do what we do every week. We're going to take our 10 seconds of silence to remember the victims of 9/11 and their families and all the people who died in the wars that followed 9/11. We're going to do that beginning now. And that is 10 seconds.
Thank you very much. And like Richard said, my name is Erik Lawyer, and I founded the Firefighters for 9/11 Truth after I watched Richard in one of his presentations, and I realized that something more had to be done. And I just want to thank Richard for everything he's doing here, and the Firefighters for 9/11 Truth strongly support Richard Gage and all the architects and engineers that have the courage to sign that petition. And I know from personal experience there's about 5 times as many out there that believe what we believe but don't have the courage to sign it. So what I'm hoping today is that people will find the courage after listening to this presentation and seeing everybody here and seeing that we are behind it. We also demand an investigation that follows the national standards and has contempt and subpoena powers. 9/11 was the greatest loss of life and property damage in U.S. fire history. This should have been the most protected, preserved, over-tested, and thorough investigation of a crime scene in world history. Sadly, it was not. What was it? Well, we know from their own admission The majority of the evidence was destroyed. Like Richard said, 22 years of experience. I've seen a lot of crime scenes. I've never seen anything like this in my life. I was out at the site. I saw trucks leaving faster than anywhere I've ever seen, but I accepted it at the time, and for years I accepted it because it was a recovery and rescue operation, and that's normal to have something like that going. Again, we'd never seen anything like it, but that was expected. What I didn't know for years, what was going on behind the scenes, was that evidence was being destroyed when it was shipped off. By their own admission, Tower 7 investigation, this investigation at Tower 7 had no physical evidence. How do you investigate a crime when you've destroyed all the evidence? It doesn't make sense. They also admit that they refused to test the explosives, or to test for explosives or residue of thermite. Now, this is what I'm going to go into here just real quickly, is there are national standards for an investigation. That's what all of us are asking for, an investigation that follows national standards and holds people accountable. This manual right here, just so you can see it, is what we call the kind of the Fire Investigation 101. This is the most basic fire investigation manual there. This is for the 2001 edition. This is what should have been referred to, at least. It doesn't have to be followed exactly, but it should have been used as a guideline for the investigation. I'm just going to cover a few of the things that are in here. So NIST violated, and the initial investigators that did not protect the scene violated the most basic of the guidelines. And I'm going to cover 5 of them here. One is the NFPA 9.3.6. It covers spoliation of evidence. Specifically what it reads is, once evidence has been removed from the scene, it should be maintained and not destroyed or altered until the investigation is complete. The steel was melted down prior to the investigation. We know that from their own admission. This is no conspiracy theory stuff. 19.2.4, exotic accelerants. If on the scene you find melted steel or concrete, you should consider the use of exotic accelerants. And they specifically say in the manual, thermite mixtures produce exceedingly hot fires that can account for melted steel and concrete. That also says they leave residues that can be tested for visually and chemically identifiable. Again, they did not test for it. And just put it in perspective, on a routine house fire, if we suspect even the slightest use of an accelerant, we're going to test for it when there's no fatalities, when there's very little property damage. So to not do it on this, there is absolutely no excuse. I can't drive that point home enough. 18.15 is analyze fuel source. All available fuel sources should be considered and eliminated until one fuel can be identified as meeting all the physical damage criteria. For example, if you find pulverized concrete, which we all know there was in all 3 buildings, there was pulverized concrete, the only fuels that can create seeded explosions should be considered. So they shouldn't be considering fires. They shouldn't be doing that. It doesn't account for pulverized concrete. They should only be considering exotic accelerants and explosives. 19.4.8.2.6, extremism. The terrorist may include fire as but one of a variety of weapons along with explosives used in furthering his or her goal. We know they used them in '93. Why would we not test for them now? There was reports that day, multiple reports, which I'll get into in a second. So they could have put them in the basement. How do we know that unless we test for it? I mean, even if it is the terrorists that they claim they are, we need to test this.
Erik Lawyer is the founder of Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, One Becoming One, Catalyst for One, the event, and a recently retired Seattle firefighter. He's on a rescue mission to help humanity make the societal shift from fear to love by remembering we are all in this together. He's joined today by Richard Gage, AIA. Richard is a San Francisco Bay Area architect, a member of the American Institute of Architects, and the founder and CEO of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Currently representing more than 2,300 degreed licensed architects and engineers who have signed a petition calling for a new independent investigation with full subpoena power into the destruction of the Twin Towers and the 47-story World Trade Center Building 7 on 9/11. They're putting out a movie together. They're going to be talking about that today, among other things. Guys, welcome to 9/11 Freefall.
Thanks, Andy.
Now, Eric, it's been a long time since you've been on the program, so before we get into what you guys are doing right now, just remind our audience, why did you start Firefighters for 9/11 Truth to begin with, and then, where have you been all of this time?
Thanks for the invitation.
As you know, as I've talked about before in the show, I was an official story believer and an adamant one. So I would be aggressive with anybody who questioned it. And it wasn't until a friend kind of opened the door from a different angle, it wasn't directly related to 9/11, and that led me to go to Richard Gage's presentation, a live presentation up in Canada that was happening 2 days after I first even began to look at this. And after watching that presentation, that was Richard's just clear, calm kind of presentation of the evidence is what just had me. I couldn't deny it. And that's where on the drive home, I was going through every emotion. I thought I was being followed. I had all these paranoia and anger and fear emotions coming up. And the only thing that made me feel like I could breathe again was if I stood up to do something. And I just kind of followed the pattern that Richard had set with Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And I decided to found Firefighters for 9/11 Truth. And that opened the door into a lot of fear, anger, and conspiracy, and I made some relationships with intelligence officers and different things, and that as the more corruption I saw, the darker kind of I went down the rabbit hole, I guess, the more I was self-destructing. And so since then, I really went in a pretty dark place, and then a teacher, a spiritual mentor is what I call him, showed up and helped me see that by me choosing to focus on the darkness and blaming other people, I was giving away my power. And once I saw that I had a different choice, it became easy for me to make that different choice. And that was what led to the event that you mentioned in the beginning. And that was what we did there was looked at the underlying brokenness in society, and from a sector standpoint, the finance sector, the health sector, justice sector, and started seeing some patterns in the underlying brokenness, and we looked at solutions that are existing today that with a little bit more energy and support behind them could radically transform some things. And that's the path I've been on for the last few years now, is really developing relationships with those people that are holding a lot of those key roles and solutions. And then Richard reached out a few weeks ago, really, and let me know that a movie we had done together that has been on the shelf for several years, was actually looked like it was going to be coming together and be released this September 11th, and that's what opened the door to our latest joint venture.
Well, that's exciting stuff. It's almost reminiscent of these old manuscripts that they might find in an author's drawer as they're approaching their old age or whatever. Maybe nothing as dramatic as Harper Lee's new manuscript sequel to Kill a Mockingbird, but it's powerful stuff. Just the information that you guys bring together and separately with your own paths that you've taken in pursuing the truth of what happened on 9/11. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Information is supposed to empower you. It's supposed to erase fear. You're not supposed to be worried. The other side is supposed to be worried because more people are waking up. And so thanks to, again, largely to the efforts of you guys. So we'll start with Richard. Tell us what this new movie is going to be about.
This is pretty exciting. Erik and I teamed up several years ago to give not only the architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth side of the 9/11 evidence and the evidence for the cover-up by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, but we needed people to know from the firefighters side, because Erik really started to delve into the problems associated with NIST's cover-up, and boy, did he pull it out of the closet, NIST's closet, and dust it off and expose it to everyone. And I'll let Erik go into detail, but that's the exciting thing. So in San Leandro, California, we had both of us on stage at a double podium, and we had a master of ceremonies, a radio talk show host, Peter B. Collins, and we had an homage to the firefighters. We started out with that because Erik knew somebody who was a bagpipe guy that had done homage services, funeral services for firefighters and celebrations, and so we show all the firefighters who perished on that day on screen. We have a family member, Michelle Weiss-Little, whose brother died in the tower, and she gives a stirring, impassioned plea for a new investigation to honor the life of her brother. And then Erik and I begin to orient people to what 9/11 really was. And boy, when you hear the evidence that Erik started hearing specifically about what got him all riled up with respect to Colonel Nelson, I'm going to say let's say that for Erik. But then we go back and forth and we present the evidence for the complete destruction, the shattering of all three World Trade Center skyscrapers on 9/11. And most people don't even know anything about the third tower that came down. So we certainly introduced them to the free fall, hint, hint, name of this radio show, of World Trade Center Building 7. 47 stories in 7 seconds. They say, of course, normal office fire, and of course, no high-rise has ever been brought down by any fire, much less a 47-story free fall, symmetrically, etc. Which, of course, means, just for the record, that all 82 columns in this building had to have been removed suddenly, symmetrically, all at once, in order for this building to fall straight down symmetrically at free fall. So we educated people about that. It was a great audience. It was professionally filmed, and we're in the final stages of editing this film right now. It's going to the DVD replicator. We're going to be able to ship this DVD on about 1st of September. We're very excited. This is something that Erik and I have been wanting to happen for many years, but the information is timeless. So, and then of course we go into the Twin Towers also, and Erik will share with you the impassioned plea at the end of this movie that we've just put together.
Where would you like me to start?
Well, I would tell them what got you Colonel Nelson and the evidence and the 9/11 commission.
Oh yeah, that's a great one. Yeah. Okay, we'll start there. And this is more of a story, which makes it more fun. When I first founded Firefighters for 9/11 Truth, I knew nothing about blogging. I knew nothing about running a website. I'd been in the business world, and I didn't know anything in the business and firefighting world. And so when I came across Colonel George Nelson's article, and when I saw it, it just connected with me right away. And I didn't know how to ask for permission. I'm like, do I have to ask permission, or can I just post it? So it became the first outside, not written by me, article I posted on the blog. And next thing I know, I get a phone call. I wasn't at work that day, but I get a phone call from my lieutenant. He says an intelligence or an Air Force colonel just called and he wants to talk to you. I'm like, oh boy, and I thought I was in trouble. And it was the exact opposite. Once I connected with him, he was just an amazing man, and he let me know. He said, I at first asked if that was all right. He said, of course it is. That's why I put it up there. You know, we need to get the truth out there. And I asked, and then he said, I want you to understand something. You've opened a door into a world you don't understand, and I'd like to help you if you're open to it. And so I said, sure. And that's what opened the door to several conversations, and he connected me with other people in the intelligence world and things that really opened the door for my understanding of what was happening. And so, but what he shared that really just spoke to me right away was I said, so when did you first know that, 9/11, what we've been told, was a lie? He said, well, I was suspicious on day one, and I knew for sure by day 3. And I said, well, how was that? And he said, well, I'd actually just retired from the Air Force right before 9/11 happened, and I was Air Force crash investigator, helped lead some of those teams when we have a crash. And so I knew the procedures and what was supposed to happen. And he said, none of that happened here. He said, when that plane hit the Pentagon, I became suspicious because what I saw on the news feeds was immediately lines of people in civilian clothing were walking in a formation, picking up evidence. He said that would never happen. The scene would be flagged, tagged, and marked, or that's the flagging, so it'd be marked and preserved. And so he said, that made me suspicious. He said, but by day 3, I knew for sure, because they were able to identify all the terrorists. And he said they did it off of ID, bandanas, things like that. And he said that is impossible, because He said, we, in a crash site that's in an open field, it would take us weeks to months to be able to do that, to recreate it, to figure out where things were. And he said, we now had 4 crashes basically that day at the same time. He said, our crash investigation teams were so far overwhelmed that would have taken months to years to piece that together. So he said that was just impossible. It was clear that they'd had a story covered. They had a prefabricated story to put out, and that's when he felt his call on day 3.
And there's a lot of good information coming out. Just as time moves forward, new bits of information are leaked here and there. And this movie, again, was kind of sitting on the shelf for a couple of years, but it's timeless, just as Richard said. The information itself is timeless. 30 years from now, people are going to know exactly what you guys were doing and what the real freedom fighters of this country and several other countries around the world were doing to expose the truth about that day just by studying movies like the one you're going to put out. But why are you putting this movie together? What piqued the interest in looking at this project again and saying we really need to complete this?
Erik mentioned that he was guided to a path where he could make a much greater service to the world at large, if you will, by focusing on solutions and at a global level. And that took his time and energy away from Firefighters for 9/11 Truth several years ago. So we weren't able to focus on creating this movie, but also it kind of left Firefighters for 9/11 Truth kind of in a hiatus because he has 200 petition signers. So and so that kind of left our outreach to the firefighters standing. So, and Erik has always wanted to get this project finished, and I've always wanted to, but we haven't had the editors, the original editors who were involved in the project originally, available until now. So I kind of see it as a kind of a sign, if you will, that it's time. Erik, it's time now. And Erik, would you share with people how the firefighters were traumatized and how they might be ready for a message, and particularly the kind of the new message that you put together at the end of the movie?
Sure. Thanks, Richard. What I learned right away, I thought when I, learned what I call, quote, the truth, that it was just a matter of me running and telling everybody as fast as I could, and that the world would wake up and we'd all fix it together. And I quickly learned that wasn't the case. And what I've come to realize is that we're all on our unique paths, and we're ready for it when we're ready for it. And trying to force somebody to look at something they're not ready for is actually causing more cognitive dissonance. It's causing more trauma, relationship traumas, because what happened to me was I caused damage not only in my own station, in my fire department, but even within my own family. And it caused a lot of division, and it's taken years to really begin healing some of that, because it was coming from a place of anger and fear. So what I'm putting out there as part of this new information and an invitation to the larger group is a time to reflect. And the best analogy I can use for this is if we were to think of 9/11 as just being one of the many global fires that's going on right now. That's kind of the root or the seed of a lot of these fires. But there's other fires that are happening too. And when you look at a fire department, especially a big city fire department, the last thing we would ever even consider is, if we had a lot of fires going, is just sending new people that want to help put out fires, just grabbing them and throwing them into the fire and going, go put it out. We would never dream of that. We'd have a moment where we pause, where we train, where we strategize, and then we go in. And even once we're trained firefighters, we still don't go rushing in as fast as everybody thinks. We do have a moment while we're responding, and a moment right when we get there that we talk and we go, we come up with a unified plan quickly, but we do. And that's why we're so effective, because it's not 100 different firefighters on scene all doing their own thing. There's a unified plan before we even start moving. And that's what I'm inviting the 9/11 Truth community into, is to pause for a moment, to start meeting, and we're creating what are called 9/11 wisdom circles, where we want to reflect on what's the underlying brokenness, and then also from our outreach actions, what's working and what's not. because I don't have the answer, the best way to go into Firehouse, and I can tell you what doesn't work. What doesn't work is just going in there and handing out a bunch of information and expecting them to just get on board, because for me, it backfired on me many times. It caused, fights. It caused, not physical fights, but, argumentative fights. It caused a lot of problems. So again, the invitation is either host, attend, or facilitate these new 9/11 wisdom circles. We're working with some professional teams that have helped us put together the questions that will bring out some pretty key information. And then once you go through those circles, you would share that information with the larger community so that we can start sharing our collective wisdom and really come up with a unified approach that is not divisive but unitive and gets the truth out there, but not in a shove it down your throat kind of way.
When Erik and I made this movie 5 years ago now, Erik did not have this vision. He was not coming from this place.
No.
So maybe the answer to your question, Andy, is with the piece that Erik made at the end and the organizations that he has established, he now has a bigger vision to share. And maybe we just weren't ready to bring out all this information about the corruption of NIST, the destruction of these towers, without that level of solution that Erik probably knew all along was coming.
It's amazing how a person changes. It gets reflected in their art. I mean, the most classic example is when they show painters and the works that they made throughout their lives, and they'll have different periods, and then maybe they have a tragedy happen in their life, and their work starts getting more dark, sad, or something else changes and it becomes more professional portraits instead of the abstract, landscapes full of really kooky shapes. So, no, I mean, it's in our field. It reflects too in terms of the maturity with which you approach the issue. The passage of time makes it less of the roof is on fire reaction as it is maybe when people were first waking up in 2006, 2005. Because the thing had just happened. So it's very interesting, not just to look at the works that get made, but also what goes into the works and the people who make those works. Now, whenever I look at some piece of art or just even an informational piece, which documentaries are, I consider it a form of art too, though, as I think about the feeling that people are supposed to come away with from it, the feeling that can't be put into a lot of words, but how you want them to think and think about the world around them as they come out of the movie premiere. What is the feeling? I want to hear from both of you guys on this. What is the general feeling that you want people to get after watching this movie you're putting out?
Well, I'll answer first, and Erik's going to have a better answer than I. But what I wanted them to have is an awareness of what really happened on 9/11, and we focus in the film specifically on the destruction of these towers, and we don't speculate on who might have done it, how they might have gotten away with it. All of the conspiracy theories, we don't have any, and so. For me, and the mission of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, our mission is to make people aware, because we believe that once people become aware, they have choice. And until then, they're just like Erik and I and you, before we were all aware, we were just blathering what we heard on the media, right? Which now we've all learned that we can't trust. We can't trust the media. We can't trust what comes out of government, because they lied to us about the truth about 9/11. So we have to make people aware. Now, Erik's mission is, okay, once they're aware, and given that they have choices, Erik wanted to provide people some higher choices. I simply ask, and Erik can tell you what some of those choices are, but for me, I want them to do something. I want them to educate other people, tell people what really happened. Send the AE911truth.org link to every architect and engineer you can find, every media representative, every government official, everybody else that you know. That's a grassroots movement growing by millions every year. That's the way change will happen. Now, Erik is more concerned about what kind of change will happen if people are not given tools to increase their awareness and their willingness to move from fear and anger, which gave us the French Revolution and the results therefrom. So he's got some other solutions and choices there. Can you talk about those, Erik?
Yeah, that's perfect, Richard. And to help your listeners have a better visual of what I'm seeing, it's the fire department analogy is really coming into play here. And so what I name in the ending of the movie is what I began to see after my own transformation. Before my transformation, I was blaming everybody. I was blaming the politicians, the bankers, everybody, the 1% basically. And then I would blame the two sides that were fighting each other. Then I'd blame the people that were being apathetic. I was blaming everybody for the problems and was saying, if those people weren't doing that, all our problems would go away. And what my teacher helped me see was that I have no control over what happens outside of me. But what I do have control over is the way I see things. And by me seeing it, my awareness shifting, like Richard named, I mean, that is the critical first step, because that's what gave me choice to even get to where I am now. If Richard hadn't shown up, I might not be where I am. And so when we looked, what I saw the perspective of, that it's basically a global fire, and it's a lot of different fires. So I think of it as a big city fire department, and then the solutions become really easy for me, or the possible solutions here. And what I'm seeing is, if we think of, like I said, 9/11 as a fire, the role that Richard and AE 9/11 Truth and many other groups are playing is that of the initial people who called 911. So they're alerting everybody they can, and that's what they should be doing, because we need to, let that alarm bell go off, and the people that are ready, they'll step into it. People that aren't ready, they're not going to, and that's fine. But if we see these as fires, what we don't have right now is we don't have any unified fire departments, any unified metaphorical fire departments. That's where my energy is going, is how do we create that first unified metaphorical fire department? And where my energy or my focus is getting the first prototype. So that would be the equivalent of, say, Seattle City, fire department, getting the first prototype going. I'm calling these new departments community unity departments. So just think of like the fire department. Instead of the fire department, we need the unity department, and not instead of, in addition to. And so what would happen next is, so Richard and AE are ringing that bell. Then the people that are ready to start helping put out these fires, or already are putting out these fires, because a lot of these groups are kind of what I call their individual kit brigades. They're doing it on their own with the resources they have, the best they can, but we're not working together yet on a really large scale. So in order for that to happen, we need what I'm calling at this point is a unity academy. So just like a fire academy, we wouldn't dream of trying to do these all on our own in the big city. We go through the fire academy, learn some shared practices. And in this case, it would be, collaboration practices. We learn the wisdom from these 9/11 wisdom circles of what's working, what's not, so we can train these new recruits in a way that are being woken up by AE. We can start training them. Now when they go out to help put out these fires, they're not just running around with their hair on fire. They actually have protective equipment going out, ways to protect themselves, ways to protect those they're going to, help, and then ways to put out these fires. And as we keep learning, it will just keep spiraling up, just the way the fire service has. So really, the bigger vision is what I'm calling the unity service.
And what you're talking about makes all the best sense. I mean, it's the reason that the military has the kind of structure that it does, because regardless of how people feel about how the military is being used in our modern day, at the very root of it is the very realistic concern that if you are out there in a conflict, you can't have everybody running around in their own direction. There's got to be some kind of order structure. And same goes with fighting this metaphorical information war, and maybe I shouldn't even classify it as that. Maybe that sounds a little bit negative, but it is about informing the public and getting people awake to what is right in front of them. And as Erik pointed out, some people wake up to this sooner than others. So we got to adapt to that. I think that we're going to have a lot of great tools coming up to be able to create this structure. One of them is the book that's coming out from AE 9/11 Truth, the Beyond Misinformation booklet. People will be able to teach themselves what are the facts of 9/11, what aren't, and be able to address the evidence even more educated than before. And so that'll be available. And with the structures, we had William Jacoby on several weeks ago talking about the local action groups that he's in charge of and putting together. So there's a lot of great things going on here. I sort of feel like we're amassing our troops, and when this all comes together, world's going to see something special happen. You guys talked about reaching out to firefighters. I've had people like Dale Pierce on this program talk about that. Dale very famously talks about his experiences with firefighters and some of the reactions that he gets. Sometimes even hearing some bizarre explanations for what we heard on 9/11 that don't make any sense when you actually pass it through the lens of this basic understanding of the universe and physics. But why is it so hard, in your opinion? I know you can't speak for every single firefighter out there, but just from your observations, why do you think this is so hard and difficult to talk about this event, even so many years after it happened, to firefighters who should be the most concerned about it?
That's a great question. That's a lot of people ask it, and I've asked a lot of different firefighters. And the best answers I've heard, or the reason that I believe it is are from the ones that were there. And I have a good friend of mine that actually was there for the drill. You know how a lot of these false flags have drills going on right before, and he was there for the drill and actually became a commander on site for quite a while. So not only was he there when it happened, he was part of FEMA, but he was there for weeks after. And he said that for him, he's like, Eric, these other conspiracies and these things that I've been looking into, I know there's probably a lot of truth to these. He said, but I cannot even begin to go to 9/11 because not only did I lose so much, but we all lost so much that day. And what I saw, he's like, to begin to think it was anything other than what I was told, I'm afraid it will just, it'll destroy me. So what I would say is I think the firefighting family is by far the most impacted because percentage-wise, lost the most that day. And it was our culture, like that willingness to just run in at all costs, backfired bigger than it ever has in history. And the shock from that just created, like, as firefighters, we come up with some healthy and some mostly not so healthy ways to cope with the traumas that we see. And, when we see kids killed and different things that we see, we have our ways of coping with that. And one of them is shutting off our emotions. And the other is making up a story that we can understand or that, can help us live with it. And I think as a culture, the fire service has created a story that helps us, that's protecting us, because we're just, imagine if you needed help. Do you want a bunch of guys or men and women showing up that are there to help you that are so emotionally broken that they can't even focus on what they're doing? It's like, no, people don't want that. So we need to learn as a firefighting family how to more healthily deal with our emotions. But right now we're using what we've had for generations. It's just shutting it out, drinking, doing the different things we do. And so I don't know personally, that's why I want these 9/11 wisdom circles, and I'd like the firefighters and that might be listening to this to kind of really step into those in a big way, the ones that are already awake, because I think together we'll be able to figure out some approaches. But I don't know if I don't know, and my gut is telling me the first step is not to just go wake up a bunch of firefighters because they're the most traumatized. I think what we need first is what we need not only for firefighters but the general population as a whole is we need some support structures in place so that when people are waking up, like you saw, many people saw what happened to me. I went through, I literally almost killed myself with what I was doing to myself. And if we just wake everybody up like that and there's no support systems in place, no network, we're going to have a lot of fatalities and a lot of broken people on our hands. And I think what we need first is to get clear on, how do we support each other as we're waking up and coming through this. And then once we have some prototypes that are working and, having really positive effects, not just waking people up, quote, waking people up, but also helping them process their emotions and where do we go from here, then I think then the faucets can be turned on. It's like, all right, now we've identified the seat of the fire. Now let's put all our resources on that and let's hit it.
Richard, I'd be interested in your perspective on this. I know you're not a firefighter, but you've got experience with outreach to just about every kind of group that's ever been reached out to with 9/11 Truth, being the CEO of AE 9/11 Truth. So what's your take on why it's so difficult to reach out to firefighters?
Well, there are several firefighters who are aware. First of all, let's remember we do have 200 of them on Firefighters for 9/11 Truth calling for a new investigation. But by far, the majority of them are not talking, or Erik said it so beautifully, they're traumatized and they survive by closing down and relying on a collective story. So nevertheless, we have more inspiration from the 9/11 Truth movement to wake up the firefighters than anybody else, because they, from the outside, as opposed to Erik from the inside, believe that the firefighters hold the key to kind of setting this new fire of awareness of the truth about what happened in 9/11, because they are the heroes. They have the credibility. So the 9/11 Truth movement en masse, I believe, has this hope that if we can just reach them with the right tools. So that's the reason Erik and I made this movie originally, filmed the movie that we made that we gave as a live dynamic presentation several years ago in California. And we're going to put it into the hands of the 9/11 Truth movement. We're going to announce this this week, and give people the opportunity to take these DVDs to the firefighters. But at the end of the DVD, Erik has made an impassioned appeal to the higher side, if you will, of not only the 9/11 the firefighters, but the 9/11 Truth activists themselves too. So we're really trying. It's a twofold purpose, at least. One is to kind of wake up the 9/11 Truth movement itself to this need that Erik has just expressed so well, as they are also doing what they want to do, which is get this message to the firefighters, which has risks, as Erik also eloquently highlighted, and the risk of angering people and causing them to confront their own fears and denial is not an easy process. So we may find that out the hard way. We may get lucky, and we will wake up a few of them. Some of them are ready. It's been 15 years, almost 14 years almost, and we a lot of people feel that that's enough time to get at some of them. But at least we have implanted the message at the end of this movie with this 8-minute epilogue that invites people to this higher purpose. I completely agree with what Richard's saying, and it's what was told to me by that intelligence officer that Colonel Nelson connected me with. He told me right as soon as he heard Firefighters for 9/11 Truth was founded, he's like, I knew right then this is the key, because he said they were the most impacted, they became the most trusted of all the different people involved in 9/11, and he's like, that's going to be what turns around and, is the key to opening the world's heart, or, mind. It's more heart. I think AE 9/11 Truth is opening the world's mind, because they do such an amazing job of presenting the facts, staying with the facts only, and that's what, from the kind of lets it in first through the mind, and then once the heart's willing to open up, that's when, it all comes together, and that's when everything changes. And so I feel that's what's happening. And if you think of a firefighter, the firefighting family, as a building itself, it's heavily fortified. I mean, there's all kinds of, protection mechanisms on that thing so that it can do what it needs to do. And if most people don't realize, in the fire service, there's so many different teams on a fire, especially a heavily fortified building fire. We've got a lot of specialized teams that are doing different tasks.
And if we just showed up on that heavily fortified building and tried to just run in and, that building and put that fire out, it's never going to happen. There's going to be a lot of people hurt. More people will die inside that building because we can't get to them. What I'm suggesting is with this new approach is doing the way we do it in the fire service. And not only do we come up with a unified plan, but each team then focuses on their area of specialty. And what one team does, and I used to be on these teams, is what's called forcible entry. So we have to get into that building. So it's the same thing with the fire service, only that's not going to be called forcible entry. It's going to be, called inspired entry, probably something like that, that we need a way in. And it's not that we're coming in not as a threat. We're not forcing our way in. It's not a command and control structure. This new unity department, it's going to take core elements of the fire service, but it won't be command and control. It's going to be cooperation and basically equality. And we'll have systems where we'll be clear on who's doing what, based on roles that have been pre-identified, not by I'm telling you to do this. And so as we do that with the fire service, I think we're going to see some results none of us can even expect. I think it will happen very quickly. But again, I believe that initial pause to get a unified plan, and I don't have the plan. I have some ideas, but I think when we come together, that plan's going to become clear to all of us. And then I think, like Richard's saying, that we'll put all our focus on the fire service, because I do too believe they're holding the key.
Yeah. So to answer Andy's question, what I'm hearing is that the way to a traumatized, shut down firefighter in denial is not to hit him over the head with the truth about 9/11, so much as to find a way to their hearts. And so Erik's saying, pause. Let's find a way that gives them, if they do jump out of the frying pan, that they're not jumping out into the fire, that there's a healing opportunity or tool or place to go where they can, as they're learning maybe the truth about what really happened on 9/11 in stages, they have support systems in place, and I think that's what Erik's trying to build. That's exactly it.
Yeah, and that's a good idea. Now, you guys are going to be doing a screening of this for close to the anniversary. I think it's the night before in New York. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, this is very exciting. Every September 11th, AE 9/11 Truth is in New York. We either come to an event that's already run the last couple of years. We have been the only organization who has organized events for 9/11 Truth activists who do show up in New York. And we have, fortunately, the 11th this year of September is on a Friday, which is a great movie night. So we have secured a venue with 450 seats. So we won't be crowded like we were last year at Theater 80 in the West Village with only 200 seats, where we had standing room only at the series of speakers that we had as our event last year. So this year we're screening, it's the world premiere of this movie, Firefighters, Architects, Engineers, Expose the Myths of 9/11. And we're going to take on Friday night, the movie does, about a dozen myths, one by one, and we shatter them all, and of course give people the evidence of why these commonly held beliefs about 9/11 are not true, including, of course, this fraudulent investigation. So Erik and I will introduce the film at 7 p.m. at West Park Presbyterian Church on 86th and Amsterdam in New York. And then we will host a Q&A and discussion at the end. Erik will clarify some of his ideas that appear at the very end of the movie and intrigue people to a new way of looking at 9/11 and healing from it and building solutions for the future. We're very excited about that. And then the next day is Saturday. There'll be a separately hosted all-day event by INN World Report and New York 9/11 Truth. I'll be in attendance at that. I believe Erik will. It's at the same venue. I don't know exactly when it starts, 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. I think it's 10. And they'll have panelists, psychologists, many of whom actually appeared in the last film that we made, 9/11 Explosive Evidence Experts Speak Out. And those psychologists will talk about some of the questions we've raised here about traumatization, changing people's worldview, and why this information is just so hard to handle and ourselves and to tell other people and watch their reaction. They just look at us like a deer in the headlights, or that we have two heads or something. How could you even possibly imagine such a thing to be true? I've heard myself. So they answer those questions. There'll also be a legal panel where lawyers will be assembled to put together the successes and failures in the legal system that the 9/11 Truth community has had. And then they'll be looking at other issues like anthrax, and they'll also look at the issue of the 28 pages. They've got some people coming to speak on that subject. But it makes for quite a series of events on the weekend, because we will also be down at the entry to the 9/11 Museum handing out our brochure, which is the alternative guide to the museum, what you will not see here in this museum. And so we have all of our evidence. And that's pretty exciting. So all day on September 11th and 12th, no, just the 11th, we'll be at the entrance there to the museum, and we will also host a press conference there early in the morning, I think. Well, actually, I don't even know. Maybe it's mid-morning. And it'll be a joint press conference with Erik Lawyer and myself and some of the other people involved in the events of the conference on the 12th. And then I'll let Erik tell you what else is happening in regards to the vigils of the reading of the names that he's more involved in.
Yeah, the only thing I can add is the reading of the names, where it's still coming together, and I'm Richard. It's still coming together. So what we're looking at is this is an opportunity. What most of the world's been focused on are the 3,000 plus names that were actually killed on 9/11 itself, and where the focus has really been, the focus has been there. What we're trying to help inspire is an awareness, more of a diffuse focus of not just those 3,000. Yes, that was on that day, but that 3,000 has resulted in the loss of millions of lives, and suicide rates of our own soldiers at 22 a day. So that impact from those 3,000 has been amplified, exponentially, because of the choices we have made and how we responded to the events of 9/11. So when, as a country, we decided, we had a lot of different choices that day and the months that followed. We could have come together like we were and continue that process to begin healing and working together so that 9/11 didn't happen again, or we could have gone to war like we did. And because we chose war, we chose a punitive response instead of a unitive response. We now get to see that. And just like, we've talked about 9/11, we believe people need to be more aware, then they have a choice. The reading of all the names is that same type of awareness. I believe, and Barbara and several other people doing this, believe that the world needs to see what happens with the punitive response, so we become aware that in the future we can make a different choice, that we don't have to just punish each other, which just, destroys everything.
Now, in our last few minutes here, I just want to hear from all of you. What effect do you think that 9/11 Truth has had on the dialogue in this country regarding news and how Americans view the news that they get right now? We'll start with Richard.
We have learned that we are not being told the truth. And that was the thing that blew me away. We're being lied to, not just by our government, which some people kind of actually understand and reluctantly expect, but that the entire mainstream apparatus with the millions of people involved in it are actively censoring the murder of 3,000 people, the attack on the World Trade Center towers, and the manipulation of the American people to go to war. And I was just shocked to learn that 90% of the mainstream media is owned by only 6 corporations, who are in turn controlled by the people who run the corporations in the arms industry, the oil industry, the banking industry. So they are not working in our best interest, and the level of deception is complete, almost, certainly across the mainstream media. And I was just in a state of shock about that. So I can't tell you how much my world turned upside down. One of the myths that Erik and I answered is surely the liberal media would have exposed any malfeasance on the part of the Bush administration for if 9/11 wasn't as we were told. And people in the audience actually laughed. That was pretty incredible.
So yeah, Richard, that brings up the perfect analogy that I've used several times to help people, understand the emotions that I felt, and I think so many others are feeling. And the analogy I've used is that, learning that first the government might have been involved in some way, either, A, by lying to us at the least, and second, learning that the media that I was taught was like our police almost over the government. Like they were the ones there to protect us, to make sure that, that they weren't getting out of control. And when I found out both of them had, could come together and lied to me in this story, what I felt was like it'd be like having my two parents that I've trusted my entire life, discovering that they've murdered a sibling of mine. And that, once I discovered that, I went, you got to be kidding me. Obviously, I couldn't go to those parents, or when I tried to, they just denied it and pretended like it didn't happen. And then when I tried to go to, the firefighters in my family, it's the equivalent of going to my siblings or my community, it wasn't okay to talk about it there either. Everyone got angry with me. So that's why I felt so alone and just devastated, because it's like my trust was violated by those two I trusted the most, and then it wasn't safe to talk about it with anybody. So that's where I began that just downward spiral, because I felt, I was lost. So that's why I feel it's so important to create that safe space to be able to first talk about this, because being shut down by the parents and by the community and the siblings, we're not going to solve this problem. So what we need to do is, those of us who are aware that, our parents have possibly murdered somebody, we need to come together in our own way and create outside of that original system. We need to create the support structures and the unification elements that we need, so that we can address these issues, since those that are directly involved are unwilling to address them for us. We need to organize, and we need to address these in a more unitive and self-responsible way, not a war, nothing violent. This is more, how do we create the world that works for all of us?
Well, this is going to be an interesting movie. I can't wait to see it myself. It's going to be debuted on September 11th this year in New York, and people will be able to go to AE 9/11 Truth to buy copies of it. But guys, thanks for all the work that you are doing, and thanks for coming on 9/11 Freefall.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Richard.
This program is on every Thursday night on No Lies Radio at 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. You can also download MP3s of this show from the Internet Archive by going to 911freefall.com. This is Andy Steele saying have a great week and good luck.